Well, let's see if I can get this quote right. It's not my quote. I've been told that the world has never changed as fast as it is changing today,
Mm,
and it's never going to change this slowly again in the future.
yeah.
So, with that kind of perspective on this, AI is going to shake everything up. And
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if the answer to your question is completely different in 5 years. You know, maybe this is going to be the highest paid position you can have in society because you can't automate it with AI.
No.
Maybe we're on the brink of incredible things on that front. Right now, we're seeing a lot of students that come in, like I said, from like the high school track. They start looking at animal care. They don't have a lot of applied experience. Like you said, not on the ranch. They're not being raised doing this. So they're starting from more of a foundational ground level. Maybe they have some pets at home, but they certainly don't have a broad spectrum. They're not like the um, farm kids that used to have, all kinds of chickens and things on their farm growing up. It's more of an urban type background that we're seeing.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Zoo Dudes podcast with Gary and Larry. I'm Adam Wilcox, and that's Gary Priest, and over there is Larry Sorel, and we're here today with our guest, Mark Irwin. Thanks for joining us, Mark. Mark teaches zoo technology courses at Jefferson Community College in upstate New York, and he's also the interim director of Zoo New York at Thompson Park up in Watertown. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks so much for being here with us, Mark.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And, I was going to say as my opening line here that you're literally the guy who wrote the book on zookeeping, but that's not quite accurate. You didn't quite write the book, although you wrote some of it.
That's right. I edited, compiled, organized.
Yeah. Yes. So we're going to get to Zookeeping, the book that you edited and compiled, but tell us a bit about your background, how you ended up in the world of zoos.
So the earliest memories I had was that I wanted to be a zookeeper. That was the main thing I had always wanted to do. And so I grew up working on my family's dairy farm, milking cows, throwing hay bales, doing that kind of stuff. And I always wanted to be a zookeeper. And it kind of came to my thought that there was really no way that I would get to do that. There's not a whole lot of zoos in Canada to choose from. And so I actually started to go towards veterinary medicine as my backup plan. And so doing that, I actually called up Toronto Zoo and I said, hey, could I do a veterinary internship there? And they said, not unless you're in vet school. Would you like to do a animal care internship? And my mind blanked. I didn't realize that animal care in a zoo is actually zookeeping. And it wasn't the term I was used to, so I declined. And a couple weeks later, they called me up and offered me a seasonal position if I would come up there and work. So I got really lucky and kind of stumbled into it. They needed somebody that could move hay bales. And that's how I got into that. I worked there for several years, usually just in a seasonal capacity. Went through vet school, moved to Watertown, New York to go into practice and be the zoo vet. And then this college program opened up and I was like, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah. So tell us about the program that opened up then and what you did in that program.
So the program's a 2-year Associate of Applied Science degree and is focused to training zookeepers. Of course, people can go on to do other things if they wish to with the same skill set in a lot of cases, but we wanted to have a focus and that was it. We had a unique little zoo here in Watertown. The program had started prior to me. Glenn Dobrogos was the director who coordinated with the college to get that going. And it was a great little program, right in line with my interests. And I haven't looked back since. It's been a lot of fun. I was the curator there temporarily on a leave of absence from the college as well. So I've had a few different roles there at the zoo.
Are there other programs like it around the country?
There's a handful of other ones that have some similarities. A lot of them take the same objective and do it slightly differently. So, for example, Santa Fe Teaching Zoo in Gainesville, they have a zoo right on campus. Moore Park in California, they take a similar approach to having a zoo right there. Whereas some other ones, work differently. Um, there's some that just work with other zoos, like we do, where we kind of partner up as organizations.
Interesting. I was curious how many there were because I sort of wonder, does, a community college in far north upstate New York, does it draw students for this? Did it draw students for this program from far away?
Yeah, yeah, we've had some from California and Florida and other places too.
Yeah, and
So
that's unusual in the community college world. Normally they're just local people. But I would think, if it's a rare program.
it's a rare opportunity. A lot of places don't have keeper training, and that goes into my interest of how do you train someone to be a zookeeper? The um, the breadth of topics is pretty amazing. You'll see that in the textbook. You need to know a little bit about education, certainly a lot about animal care, exhibit design, veterinary science, conservation. It's a very broad topic or profession to get into.
Yeah, just reading the titles of the chapters in the book, my head was spinning just at the amount of information that it seems that a zookeeper needs.
Mm.
Yeah,
And certainly some of it focuses to where they're going to the work they do. If you're working with reptiles, you may not need to learn about marine mammals. So there is a certain
right.
amount of, pathways through the field.
Yeah, and Gary and Larry, I mean, when you got into the field, um, were there weren't programs, there weren't books, or were there?
There certainly wasn't books, but Moore Park out in California may have existed because I know when I was a keeper at LA, started in 1977, we had Moore Park students at the zoo in Los Angeles. And outside of that, I really don't know. Maybe even Santa Fe in Florida goes back that far. But it was interesting that the students coming out of Moore Park, at least at the time I was there, were a lot of them, I would say 50% of them were looking more at training show animals, TV, movie, etc., than they were more traditional zookeeping.
Right. And Gary, you got hired out of a grocery store, so
It was a bad day for SeaWorld.
oh,
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Larry, about Moore Park's early beginnings because of Hollywood being so close to Simi Valley. There really was an awful lot of interest and a lot of expertise for training animals to go to a place on set and that sort of thing. So, but that gradually changed over time. There's still a lot of people that graduate that do want to go into the film and television community, and although those opportunities are mostly in Canada now, from what I understand. It's like a lot of things have changed in Hollywood in the last 10 years.
interesting. Well, it's pretty clear from it's going to sound like I'm throwing shade at you guys, but from talking to you guys that this kind of thing was really necessary. But Mark, tell us about why you thought, not just because of Gary and Larry, but why you thought that this book was necessary.
Well, I had spoken with my animal care manager at Toronto Zoo as I was working there, because I was hungry to learn how to do a lot of these things, and they had an in-house manual that had a lot of information. I just loved reading that. It was such a fascinating book, and there's aspects that are so practical, and to put that in using diagrams and explanations, it was a really good thing. But we spent many days talking there. Just we would love to do that. And many years later, we did. That's John Stoner. He's one of the co-editors on the book.
Yeah. So he was a mentor to you and then a colleague
Yeah. Yep.
in the project.
And to this day.
And we were talking before you came into the studio with us about the project that it must have been. I've managed publications operations for much of my career, and that was the first thing I thought looking at that table of contents was what a nightmare it must have been to wrangle these authors?
Yeah, it's certainly explaining it, trying to keep everyone focused. We did our very best to keep it similar in tone and similar in audience. So when we described it, we said, "What do you think any new zookeeper should know or have readily accessible when they go into the field?" So that was kind of our target, and communicating that to them. We had 72 different authors for that book,
Wow.
and yeah, it was a lot of coordination, trying to get deadlines, and sometimes one's prose is different than the next person, and we wanted to try to really synchronize it.
Yeah. How did you find them all? I can't imagine you knew those 70 whatever authors ahead of
Um,
time.
yeah, so I started with a few people I did know, and as they came on board, we had more momentum, and we were able to reach out to more people, having more credibility like that. I would go to, zoo conferences, AZA and others, and just sit there and kind of lurk and say, okay, this person is talking about that, go see a session with them, and put them on the list, and then talk to them. It was fun. It's a lot of work, but boy, it was fun to network with colleagues who have the same passion.
Yeah, and I assume I mean built your own personal network to this wonderful point. There's people from all over the world who are involved in the project, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we did want to try to make it global. There's a few areas that we couldn't really. It took a really good stab at it, but we didn't have anybody from Asia, China, Russia, Middle East, or even South America. But I think, moving towards a second edition, we'll try to get that.
Is that in the works?
It started. It's got a ways to go yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think a lot of the principles remain similar, but
Some of it, yeah, some of it really I don't think would have changed certain chapters, and others are going to be dramatically different. We've got so much technology and different approaches that some will need a complete rewrite.
um, Larry, you had a question that I thought was a good one about if a person already has a degree, what would be their motivation for a program like the one at Jefferson?
Yeah, yeah. Mark and I have. I've known Mark for years and years, and he was actually the chair of my board when I worked up at in Watertown at Zoo New York, and so we've had a number of discussions about the benefit of focusing into the technology and the technical aspects of zookeeping, even though you may have a degree in biology or behavior or something like that. And I know a number of the students that I work directly with did have 4-year degrees and were coming back and doing this technology. So, Mark, if you could talk a little bit about why would anyone care? Hey, I've got a 4-year degree. Why do I want to go back to a community college?
It's a unique field. What people look for, like we said, is very broad as far as what you should know, but the skill set is as well. So if you want to get employed, there's so many places that have had a waiting list of people that would apply. I think it diminished over the pandemic, but from what I'm hearing, there's a lot more people and interest coming into the field. And if you've got a degree, a bachelor's degree, you've got your science courses down, it's still not going to help you coil a hose, show up on time, some of those foundational things that you also need to have. And I'm sure you guys will know, there's a lot of work to get done, and you don't want to start with square one all the time, every day with every intern.
Right. I think another thing that impacts that, and this is a personal observation, some of it backed up by real observational numbers. But when I started in LA in 1977, there was approximately 100 keepers in the main zoo. There was one woman. That's changed to almost completely flipped. I would say probably about 3/4 of the animal care staff is now female. And anecdotally, by observation, they have the sciences knowledge, but what they seem to lack generally is the hands-on, how do you uh, coil a hose? What's the proper way to hose down and exhibit? I've even had and this was a long time ago when I was in LA, and it was a male, so no sexism here, but he was obviously came from a well-to-do family and had never raked before, and he was trying to rake with a leaf rake with the tines up instead of with the tines down. So that's kind of what Mark's
Dead giveaway.
yes.
Yeah.
What Mark's and the other programs do is give you the real wet lab, hands-on, how do you do these very practical things that you need to know as a zookeeper.
Right. I think, both you, Mark, and Gary have a similar sort of upbringing in a sense. Gary grew up on a ranch and you grew up on a farm. So me sitting here not knowing anything, I'm like, well, those skills are going to translate really well. Do they? That's a question for both of you.
I was going to say, are we
Mark.
asking Mark's dad or what?
Some of it definitely does transfer. I like to think that's where some of my work ethic came from, getting in there, doing physical labor, have to get up at 6 a.m. to go milk the cows. There's a lot of characteristics of animal care that definitely go right into that. And then there's the more specific skills of, working a rake or a pitchfork, things of that nature. So it carries through, but to less degrees, I think if you're going to be working with a diverse taxa that maybe are invertebrates, you can't rake their yard as well.
Right. Right. So what are the courses that you actually teach, Mark, in the program?
So we have broadly, I guess you could say, 3 categories of them. One is your general education. So that would be things like math and English, social science, and those would help to transfer if students would like to transfer. We've got our biology and biology related field type stuff. So general biology as an intro, and then they'll start working into aquarium science, vertebrate biology 1 and 2, things of that nature, animal behavior. And then we have our zoo specific ones, which are more professional training. They would include things like introduction to the domestic animals, record keeping, zoo history, behavioral husbandry, intro to vet science, things like that. Within that are what we have called clinicals, and that's where you go work in the zoo. So for 1 day a week, you'll be working with a zoo staff member to go through and do the raking and the hosing and all that stuff as well.
Right. Kind of an internship sort of program
Yeah.
in that sense.
Where do people come from now, Mark, that are interested in this as a career? Where do you see? Is it different? Because it used to be guys like you and me that grew up on a ranch had a leg up. I was actually told after I was hired that it was specifically because we had horses and the responsibility for caring for the horse. If the horse didn't get watered or fed, it was your job. And if you didn't do it, that horse went without, and you learn those lessons real quickly. So where are they coming from now?
Well, I think there's a lot of interest still. I've done this for many years, and I've seen that as Animal Planet came on, we saw a surge of interest based on that TV channel. We've seen different trends. I think right now I'm seeing the same thing where it is more female. It tends to be younger students that are coming in, not as many, but some that are coming as a second career. We're near a military base here, so we'll see a few that are either military or that they have military spouse, for example. And then we've got the more traditional student that will be coming through. In our case, we see a lot of BOCES students. Those are Board of Cooperative Educational Services. So they're the ones in school that have taken an interest in animal care, veterinary practices or the like. We're seeing a lot of those. So they're almost choosing a little bit earlier and coming through the high school system with a track in mind.
Interesting.
Mark, are there a lot of people who, like you, are interested in veterinary medicine? And is this sort of a way station along the way to that career sometimes?
We do have a lot that are interested in that, and oftentimes they don't know the difference. So we try to highlight that when they're looking at the program. I have an informational survey that they would complete before they apply, just to kind of highlight that it is a different kind of job, a different skill set. And at least in some states, New York State here is one, you need to be licensed. So you need to go to an accredited school for that purpose. So it could, but it's just not going to be a direct path. You would do our degree and then another degree.
Right. And is the degree that you give, that's not really a license. It's a degree. That's
That's right.
different, right? And
Right.
is there licensing in the world of zookeepers currently? I suppose I should know that, but that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, not in this country, which I think there's some room for growth. Licensing might be a little bit far because of the infrastructure it would require. But I think having some kind of a certificate that is granted through an organization and that quantifies how that person has learned and trained and what they can do would be useful. Um, the lab animal technicians have something like that. It's kind of a three-tier system, and you're, I think, an assistant laboratory technician, a laboratory technician, a laboratory technologist. So you advance based on your education and your work experience.
And how is the program doing in terms of placing people in the profession?
We've had some students that have gone on quite well with a 2-year degree. It's an interesting thing when you look at what zoos are looking for. Many of them do want to see a 4-year bachelor's degree. So the majority of our students transfer and they continue their education. There are many that will accept a 2-year degree and some that will only accept it when they hear about it and they realize, okay, this is really specific to this role. We were looking for a bachelor's degree, but we'll go with this one because it is a little more focused. I think there's a lot of workforce and labor market trends that have to be looked at pretty carefully. I know it's a goal of AZA in their last strategic plan that wages have to come up. I think there's a contradiction in the amount that keepers are getting paid relative to the experience and education that they're being required to in some places. It's a real challenge, and the consequence of that is that we see people stay in the field much shorter times. You know, it's not an older profession where you see a lot of people in their 40s and 50s. The majority are younger, and then they transition to a different career quite often.
Right. And uh, all three question for all three of you, do you think the idea of needing a 4-year degree to be a zookeeper makes sense? I hope the way I'm asking that doesn't betray what I think the answer is.
No,
Why don't you go ahead, Gary? You've been quiet for a while,
yeah,
unusually quiet.
I'll tell you what, our experience in San Diego is we had a lot of people that would come in with a 4-year degree and were surprised that what we were asking people to do with animals didn't require that. But because there was so much interest in working in San Diego, I mean, it's a beautiful city and a world class zoological facility, and San Diego's just a nice place and real diverse experience. So we would have between 150 and 200 applicants for every animal related position.
Wow.
And in order to interview 10 or 15 people, sometimes that, we would say, all right, how many of those 150 people have a 4-year degree? And if that gave us the number that we were looking for, then for that cohort coming in applying for a single job, we would talk about that 4-year degree and what they may have done to support, a career in animal care, animal science.
Yeah, I
So,
would guess that's like the opposite of the experience at the Zoo New York, right? Where it's tiny place in the middle of nowhere. You're not getting 150 applicants, right?
Even in a little place like that, how many we had to screen through. And I'm going to tag on to Gary's response just a little bit and say, if a 4-year degree is not used as a simple eliminator, a 4-year degree with the way zookeeping has evolved in the last 10 to 20 years
yeah,
is beneficial because we're expecting
absolutely.
so much more out of our keepers than we did 20, 30, 40 years ago. We expect them to be able to speak with a degree of eloquence to guests
Yes.
on a regular basis. We're expecting them to keep accurate, thoughtful records. We're expecting them to participate to a larger and larger degree in training for vet procedures and knowing what they're doing. And also that broader knowledge helps you as you say, well, I don't want to work in this area anymore. I want to go work in um, with the great apes or with marine mammals, or I want to become a supervisor. So that broader knowledge, as long as it's not simply eliminator at hiring, is very, very helpful. And then layering something like the Zoo Tech program. So you come in with basic skills from the get-go, and you're not having to say, okay, turn the rake around, use the other side. It's a great benefit.
Yeah, I would agree completely. And it's not a requirement still, as far as I'm aware, in San Diego. So it's not written into the job requirements that a 4-year degree is mandatory. But I agree with Larry. I think with the way that we are going technologically, it's certainly helpful.
Yeah. Would the formal program you have, I think I know the answer to this, but I want interest in your answer, benefit current zookeepers?
That's the zoo technology program here.
Yeah.
I think if they're current zookeepers, they're doing a lot of it, and it would be more focused to what is it they want to get to professionally. So we can certainly give them more experience and a door into somewhere that is requiring a degree if they don't have a degree. If it's a privately run zoo operation, they can hire anybody that they want. And sometimes those staff members are looking to advance their career and go up to a bigger zoo or something like that. And we could help them open those doors. So I think that would be more on a case-by-case basis of, very much a pragmatist, is where do you want to get to and what do you need to be able to do? So that's where I think the value of combining some applied experience where you're doing the job with the theory that enables you to get to where you want to go. If you want to become a curator, you're going to have to be, very savvy to the science of the animals you work with, the conservation work that you'll be doing. So I think depending on your goals, it has to align. On the flip side of that, if you are wanting to be a keeper and you do not want to get into any of the more advanced science activities, you probably don't need to go on and get an advanced degree because you're going to have that skill set already, that you don't need that. So again, it needs to be kind of in step with what the zoo is willing to pay and what they expect that person to do. Right now, I think wages are pretty low for someone that's going to have, advanced college degrees in a lot of the average zoo, perhaps.
And this is an economic problem, right? It gets to, the management of zoos and how they're funded. Anything you guys want to talk about in that realm in this context?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, Larry, this is the topic.
I always have something to say.
Yeah.
The challenge, and I know, as Mark referenced earlier, it's in the AZA strategic plan to raise wages. Well, there's clearly, since most zoos are nonprofit and depend upon donors, government funding, admissions through the gate, that raising salaries has a direct implication on the budget. And you don't want to price yourself out of the market through admissions, trying to defend that to a government agency to increase your funding so you can pay people more. That's always a challenge. And how do you blend those two? And I think part of it is AZA's been working on it. I've helped through different committees. I know Mark has helped a little bit. I think that's something CipherWorks can contribute to, and that having people understand the skill sets and the responsibility associated with caring for living animals is critical. We went through it a little while ago with veterinarians and zoo vets, and their salaries are beginning to come up finally to where they should be. So I think it's everybody combined looking at what is the pay level appropriate for the level of responsibility and knowledge, but ultimately, where do you get the money? And that's got to come from maybe a slight admissions increase, or showing donors you're doing things, or government funding doing that.
Interesting to me. In talking to just friends in the last month about doing this podcast, I've encountered a lot of, I don't know what I'd say, negativity that surprised me. It's almost like there's a public perception out there of zoos that's actually quite old. It's sort of, it's sort of talking. It seems like people's impression of zoos is, things like we talked about in the first episode, Gary, where there's, you know, bad environments for animals and things like this, and people do have something of a negative view, even though the world of zoos has been changing quite rapidly for 50 years, and that makes the funding issue doubly difficult, I would think. You're fighting this public perception that's kind of old and off base.
Yes, we had it in San Diego, kind of an interesting thing. Uh, uh, as Larry was saying, his experience in Los Angeles, there were just no women animal caregivers. Most of the people were guys, and they were retired after 20 years out of the Navy or Marine Corps, because we have military bases here. And they could actually, with their retirement and what they were earning as a animal care professional, they were able to live in San Diego at a reasonable way. But model has completely changed in the last 25 years. That just doesn't happen anymore, and it's much more, the younger. Well, another thing that doesn't happen anymore is people aren't coming to us from growing up on a ranch. There just aren't as many farmers as there used to be, or they are harvesting in such a way that it doesn't require as many people as it used to require. So that was one of the questions I actually wanted to ask of Mark is, where do you see people coming from? I mean, we want to appeal to, especially in this podcast with CipherWorks and everything else, we want to appeal to the broadest possible spectrum of interested applicants. What do you think about that?
Well, let's see if I can get this quote right. It's not my quote. I've been told that the world has never changed as fast as it is changing today, and it's never going to change this slowly again in the future. Yeah. So with that kind of perspective on this, AI is going to shake everything up, and I wouldn't be surprised if the answer to your question is completely different in 5 years. Maybe this is going to be the highest paid position you can have in society because you can't automate it with AI.
No.
Maybe we're on the brink of incredible things on that front. Right now we're seeing a lot of students that come in, like I said, from like the high school track. They start looking at animal care. They don't have a lot of applied experience. Like you said, not on the ranch. They're not being raised doing this. So they're starting from more of a foundational ground level. Maybe they have some pets at home, but they certainly don't have a broad spectrum. They're not like the farm kids that used to have, all kinds of chickens and things on their farm growing up. It's more of an urban type background that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've known, Larry, you described yourself as wanting to be outside all the time when you were a kid, and the other friend I have who was a zookeeper, he grew up as an outdoorsman, camping, wilderness adventures and that kind of thing. So it is sort of natural for him to get into it. But yeah, I don't think kids these days are spending a lot of time outdoors. Mine didn't.
So Mark,
the burden on the next generation is going to be huge, because, every species we lose is one that we'll never have again. The opportunity is now. And I'm passionate about this next generation and what can we do to, kind of shake the tree and bring some people out, and because it's an amazingly rewarding career. Yes, you know, you have to be pretty frugal in terms of your tastes of what you can afford as a animal care professional. It just doesn't pay well. I hope that Mark is right, and that will change. Man, I hope I live to see that. But so far, for the 50 years I've been involved, I haven't seen that so much.
Yeah, it's a nice aspirational goal for
It is.
AZA, but how?
That's always the devil in the details of how do you do that. So,
Yeah.
Mark, let me ask you this: the United States, especially Western Western civilization, it's becoming more and more urbanized, less and less rural. And it requires probably more foundational education to be able to do the work than it used to when, you know, you were expected to cut the grass, rake the leaves, even, you know, things as simple as that. If you were going to talk to a prospective keeper, what would you, let's say 16, 17 years old, just considering what am I going to do when I get out of high school? What career path advice would you give them?
Run away?
Hopefully, no, that's not the answer.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would probably just recommend is that they take some time to look into it. If there's job shadows that they can do, if there's, you know, junior zookeeper programs they can take, maybe join a docent program. If they want to work in a vet clinic, maybe the vets would I used to go ride around with the farm vet. Maybe there's opportunities like that. But the more knowledge they gain on it and the more experience that they can get before they start making those decisions really does help. Because you can be all committed to it, but then when you show up in high heels to clean the elk yard, you're kind of like, this is not what I expected. And they could have prevented that by a little research beforehand. And so I think just giving it a shot as much as you can, even if it's just reading a book about the job or the career you're interested in.
All three of you have, you know, long careers in this world. It's a different spin on the same question. Do you evangelize to young people when you're talking to them? Do you say you want to do this, or are you more equivocal?
When I was more active, I mean, now that I'm retired, I barely see young people. You know, a young person to me now is 50 years old. So, but when I was more active in the profession, in the field, I would on a regular basis get a call. Can you talk to my son, my daughter? They want to get involved. Once people know, hey, I work in a zoo, and you're out somewhere, that just sparks an interest, sometimes a bad interest, mostly a good interest. And yes, I would evangelize, but I would also always phrase it, you know, that you're not going to get rich doing this. If your focus is money, this is not where you want to go. Your focus has to be passion for what you're doing, and manage yourself in a way where you can still live comfortably.
Yeah, and of course that message right there is pretty countercultural in America.
Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
It is.
So
You
how
know,
about
one
you,
of-
Mark? What do you same question for you.
Evangelize, I'm very passionate about it. You know, I think it's rare to have somebody that always wanted to do this kind of a thing through their life. And so I come at it from that angle, realizing a lot of people don't. So I try to share my passion for it, and I try to communicate why, so that they're not surprised that it's not where you're going to get rich. You're going to smell funny at different times, all the things that some people love that and some people don't. So I try to do it honestly, but I think sharing your passion for it comes across, but it doesn't misdirect them. And I think that's my primary focus. If you want something that's different every day, if you want to have, you know, connections and relationships with animals that most people never see or work with, there's some really great things about this. Just the variety If you get bored, you don't want to work inside. Those are reasons you want to look at it. If you're wanting to get rich and be a weekend warrior, have a yacht, probably not. Definitely not.
And Gary, how about you?
You know, my experience, I had an opportunity to travel around an awful lot in the 90s to zoos all over, and in different languages through interpreters. And one of the things that I was absolutely stunned to discover is that when I went and got an advanced degree, I never had one class in goal setting. Not one class. No one ever mentored me, taught me how to do basic goal setting. And it begins with imagining the desired outcome that would be pleasing to you. You start there. You start with a big picture idea of where you want to be when you're our age, and looking back on your career. And then what are those steps necessary to take you in that direction? And everything else sort of falls into place. I used to ask keepers to imagine that they were going to leave San Diego and sail to Hawaii. Now, what would you want, and they would have to think deeply, because most people don't do that, and
No.
When it became a fun exercise, is someone would say, because more and more women were getting into it, they wanted dancers from Chippendales to join the sailing adventure, and other people would be maybe a little more practical and say, well, we probably ought to have a fishing pole so we can catch food on the way, and how
And some
long will it
fresh
take
water.
by the way. And so it sort of inspired them to use their imagination and apply it towards your career goals. And I always felt that that was one of the most fruitful things that I would share with people. Maybe a different perspective, but I would encourage people to really routinely. I'm learning to speak Spanish, and I've got a program that is absolutely the best thing I've seen, and it's free. And my brother is bilingual. My dad was. I missed the boat, and I even had a business for a long time in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. They all spoke English, so I never had to learn to speak Spanish, but it just bothered me that, I'm retired now. I can do whatever I want. I'm going to set a goal. By God, I'm going to learn how to speak Spanish.
I think I'm going to join you. I'm going to join you in that, Gary. One of my favorite restaurants here in town, I love the owners. It's a son and a mother, and the mother speaks no English. And we have these very intense conversations through her son, but I want to talk to her.
Good. That's now,
Right?
See, that's a legitimate goal. And how blessed she would be, even if you butchered it, you're trying. And people always reinforce trying.
Yeah.
It just, trying leads to actually accomplishing. And it's the first step towards accomplishing. And so Go for it. I encourage you. I'll hook you up with that free app.
Please. Mark, you wear a lot of hats. One of them is you're a vet. Do you still get to be a vet these days?
No, not really.
No.
I'm not in practice. I'm licensed only in New York, and I don't really have too much time to stay current on it. So, but boy, it does come in handy when you have decisions or terminology and things that come up on your daily basis. It's nice to be able to speak that language and kind of recognize that, especially in a small facility where you've got there's not that many specialty, there's not departments in the same way that you would have in a big one.
Right. I know that's a whole nother subject, but the veterinary field is, as I understand it, in a bit of crisis right now. Anything you want to say about that without spending the next hour on it?
I would say that there's a lot of similarities to it in many ways. I think of the zookeeping field as being like that, but not as developed, not as big. And so there's a little more advancement. We had the first veterinary technicians in what was it, 1969. So it's a fairly young profession, and in many ways analogous to what zookeepers would do. I presented at AAZK back in 2022 at the conference, and one of my premises in the workshop was that we could look at doing some kind of certification in the field and use vet tech as a model for how that would be advanced. Um, I think it's a good functional way, and there's opportunities for advancement beyond. In the vet tech case, it's a 2-year degree typically, but you can go on, you can get your bachelor's or a DVM. So there's avenues to keep going, but that foundational skill set has been established, and in many states, it's a licensed profession, not all. So it just, to me, similar, a lot of the similar issues. Compassion fatigue is pretty big in the medicine field, just like it is in animal care of other types.
Yeah.
Wages are not high. If you want to get paid well, don't go into veterinary medicine, become a human specialist. Similar factors, I think.
Yeah. And again, like we were saying earlier, you're asking people to learn an awful lot to make a very little.
Mm-hmm.
But...
Yeah, we're seeing shortages for that. And the vet tech field is similar to zookeeping. They don't stay in it very long relative to a lot of other professions on average.
Yeah, I have 2 silly questions that I want to ask all our guests. They're not that silly. Do you have a species that you think you want to highlight that people may not know much about that from your work? That's question 1.
Go ahead, Gary.
I've got a really cool snake in my backyard. I was at a wood lot, getting wood for the fireplace because I love having a fire in the wintertime, and our winters are so frigid here. But I found a king snake, and we talked about it in the first episode, and I am blown away at what I didn't know about snakes. He spends most of his time in a hot tub. Well, it's a porcelain, but he enjoys soaking, and he shed 4 times in 6 months already. He's growing, and I have neighbors bringing me mice now. That's way cool. So I'm having an awful lot of fun. It's a coastal subspecies that only resides here in San Diego, so it's unique. And, I haven't tried any training. I might try a laser beam because we did some work in Louisville with Komodo dragons and laser beams and Cuban crocodiles. That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, they're way smarter than we ever gave reptiles credit for.
Oh yeah. You sure you're not overfeeding them and getting them too fat, Gary?
That is a possibility. I was told 1 mouse a week by a knowledgeable professional, but I confess I'm spoiling him or her.
The neighbors keep showing up with more mice.
Gotta do something with them.
How about you, Mark? You got a species you want to highlight?
This may not be too zoo duty, but just a domestic cat. I've got a cat. I love her dearly, and I think when you talk to the typical person, that's where their animal connection comes in. And I think you can take that example through everything that you do with within the zoo field as well. If you want to talk conservation, keeping your house cat indoors and training them to stay indoors and be happy that way, that makes a big impact. If we had, 20% of our pet population not be outside, that's going to have some real conservation benefit. So, I'm start at home, with my cat and kind of out from there. I love some of the charismatic megavertebrates. Those are the favorite to work with for the rush that it gives you. But I would start at home with my cat.
Okay, you lost me with charismatic megavertebrate. Is that what you said?
Big animals. Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent.
Big furries. Big furries.
The 3 of us knew.
Being semi-charismatic, fairly large invertebrates ourselves, we knew something about that. So, Mark, I wasn't aware at all that we should keep our pets indoors more, and that would have a conservation effect. It makes sense to me, but can you explain that a little?
Just on the cat example, cats are pretty much the main mesopredator, middle-sized predator in a lot of areas within the country. They take out songbirds, and we're seeing in this area, bluebirds, they're getting predated by cats, and they're not a native species, so they're invasive, and they're having a big impact on wild populations. So if you just keep your cat indoors, they also live way longer. They don't get hit by vehicles. They don't catch diseases. They don't get in fights. So it's a win-win all around. It's just once you have a cat that goes outdoors, they like to do that. And so it's a behavior that early on you can usually kind of direct them as to what their comfort is, and they can be completely happy indoors with, good quality of life. But it takes some attention and focus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
our cat. I have a cat too, and she was actually rescued at the zoo as a kitten. And she spends all of her time inside to the point where we can actually leave the door to the back deck open, and she'll sit in the doorway and not go out. And that's what she's perfectly happy inside. And I think that's sort of the goal. The cats, I'm not going to say the exact number, but a couple or more billion birds a year are killed by cats in the United States.
Did you say billion?
Billion with a B.
Wow.
That's how many birds are taken. And a lot of times they're just killed because it's just the prey instinct that the cat exhibits, and they don't eat them. They just kill them. Sometimes they'll bring them home as a present to their owners.
That's what my cat growing up did. He just deposit them on the back doormat.
Yeah, and it's amazing with the number of wild/feral, just outdoor cats. How many birds alone? Never mind small snakes, lizards, etc., that they kill. So yes, very much a conservation effort, keeping your cat inside.
If my dog were indicative of all dogs, then we would be having woodchucks would be an endangered species. He's gotten, I hate to use the word better, but better as he gets older at finding and killing them. And we can't let him off leash anywhere anymore because within 60 seconds, he's going to find and kill a woodchuck. And that's no fun. I mean, certainly for the woodchucks, but it's no fun for us either.
Got health concerns too. And yeah, there's a lot of problems that could come from that.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Larry? You got a species you want to talk about?
Well, I get frequently asked, and I'm sure Mark and Gary do also, what's your favorite animal?
Right.
And I can't pick one, but one that I was involved in, I would say early on in my zoo career, and that I found extraordinarily interesting and had the great opportunity to work directly with it in several different ways. It's the koala. At Los Angeles Zoo in the late 70s, myself and another keeper actually convinced the zoo director to explore acquiring koalas in LA for the first time since they were imported to San Diego from Australia in the 30s. And quite honestly, I think he thought it was a joke. And these guys, they don't know what they're doing. And and apparently we did, or we stumbled along well enough, because after 2 or 3 years, we actually, not alone, but with the help of several people, several organizations, we ended up, with the help of architects, designing, funding the Amundsen Koala House in Los Angeles, and imported Victorian koalas, marsupials, and they do smell like eucalyptus when you get up close. And it was a great experience because it involved, for us, the whole gamut of what a zookeeper touches, how to take care of them, how big do the habitats need to be, what do you need for backup housing, not just what's on exhibit, the science or the technical side of importation. We designed the building and opened it. It's or it used to be. I haven't been out in LA in a long time, so I don't know what it even looks like anymore. the koala house, but it was a reverse light um, exhibit. So we were dealing with lighting and projecting, and it was just tremendously interesting for the two of us. And very rewarding. It ended up being, because it was indoor, a mixed species habitat with wombats and, oh, I'm trying to remember. There was birds, but I can't remember which. Maybe palm cockatoos, and I think bandicoots. So it was greatly rewarding. Not an animal I ever thought I'd be interested in, but once you get into it, and I'm sure Mark and Gary would echo this. Once you get into studying an animal at that
Yes.
depth, your interest in them becomes exponentially increased. So it was quite the experience.
The more you know, the more you want to know
Absolutely.
about them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought the koalas just sat around and got stoned. Isn't that what they do?
Well, sort of, but not really.
Not really?
Not really. They do sleep a lot. And yes, eucalyptus does have that effect, but
Yeah.
to a degree.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been a lot of fun, and we've eaten up an hour very, very quickly. Mark, I want to thank you so much for taking the time with us today. It's been great.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. And Gary and Larry, it's always a pleasure. You've been listening to the Zoo Dudes podcast with Gary Priest and Larry Sorel and Mark Irwin. Can't wait for the next episode of Zoo Dudes. I feel like I learned so much every time, guys. Thanks so much. If you're watching this on YouTube, put some stuff in the comments. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Tell us what you want us to talk about, and we'll get to it.
Zoo Dudes is brought to you by CypherWorks and the Animal Care and Conservation Academy. Next time on Zoo Dudes, we're going to be talking with a couple of people. Deborah Erickson, who is the Executive Director of Wildlife Madagascar, as well as the Atlantis Blue Project Foundation, and Dolph de Jong, who is the President and CEO of the Toronto Zoo. Both of them were on the AZA group that did the AZA Futures Report 2 years ago. And we're going to talk about that, what's in store for zoos in the future in the world and America. So we hope you'll join us.